Good morning folks, and welcome to another helping of Mr H's Hot Pot. You join me this morning in the county of Suffolk where we're at Rendlesham Forest and what is arguably the UK's greatest UFO sighting. Now this is sometimes dubbed as the UK's Roswell, and I'm now at the east gate of former RAF Woodbridge, which in 1980 when this UFO sighting happened was a US Air Force base. And it all started here where two US Air Force patrolmen who was doing the stagging on where they was walking around the camp saw some strange lights over in that direction in front of me. Now obviously it was the height of the Cold War back in 1980 and they had to go out and investigate. So they let the main office know what was going on and they sent some more patrolmen down. They left one guy here stagging on, making sure nobody was going to get into the camp, and they went and investigated. So we're going to follow in their footsteps now and follow this UFO trail and see what they saw that night. Now before we set off on the UFO trail, we'll just take a little look at the east gate. There's some posts here that state MOD. I think this has now been turned over to civilians. It's not an MOD site anymore. Obviously once the US left it became an RAF base once again. There's signposts there with no sign on them. So you imagine back in the day that would have said RAF Woodbridge. And you can see the security up for the east gate there, which is all boarded up these days. Obviously inside what was RAF Woodbridge is now private land, so we can't go in there, and that's not what we've come to look at. We've come to look at this UFO trail. So we're going to head off now down this big long road, which would have been a service road back in the day. And we'll cross over and we'll make our way to our little second point on the UFO trail. Because all this has been made now into like a tourist attraction, because obviously people have come down to have a look. So it's sort of numbered off. So this is the first little stop point, and then we'll make our way to number 2 where I'll tell you a little bit more about the story. This happened on the 27th of December 1980 at around 2 AM, so it must have been pretty scary being in here because all this would have been pitch black, being forestry, and then seeing strange lights over in the distance. These guys must have been wondering what was going on. Now I do wonder if they were supposed to leave their weapons in the base, because obviously that was American soil and UK soil. You're not supposed to carry weapons about, but I'll bet if they was going over looking at something they didn't know what was going on, they'd have been carrying their weapons. Anyway, enough waffling, join me at point 2. So we're now at the end of that service road into RAF Woodbridge. The east gate's way back there, where back in 1980 the lone patrolman was left guarding the camp. And we're at the road leading into the forest where the 3 patrolmen entered. So we'll enter into the forest now and follow in their footsteps. So we've now just entered into the forest. As you can see over there, the roadway is where the 3 men would have entered into the forest. Now by the time they got to this point, apparently radio communication with the camp, which is over there, had broke down, because radios in the 80s, they weren't as good as they are today. So what they decided to do was leave one man here, and he could send radio contact back to the guy on the gate and then into the camp, and 2 men made their way into the forest to go and have a look at the object, which by now they could see it landed in a clearing. So they made their way over to it, and that's what we're going to do now. So come on, let's go. I will say this for whoever's set this out, you know, whoever it comes under. It's well signposted. I mean, there's lots of these posts that mark on UFO trail, as you've just seen there. And then on the other side, just for any aliens that may be following, they've signposted it with that. These are every so often so you can follow it and you don't get lost, because there's lots of paths leading off all over here because it's a great big forest. And it's on the Forestry Commissioner, and obviously people come in doing bike trails and running and all that kind of good stuff. So it'd be very easy to get lost and veer off if you didn't follow the signpost. So, you know, they've done a good job with that there. Right, we'll carry on and make our way to the clearing now, because we should be getting to it just up here, just beyond where these 2 people are in front of us. So we're now approaching that clearing where those two patrolmen back in 1980 saw that strange craft. Now you can probably just see it through the trees there as we make our way closer. And as they was approaching it, they saw this craft hovering about 12 inches off the ground and surrounded in mist. You know, and they decided to make their way towards it as we're going to do. And they felt as though they was moving in slow motion apparently. So we'll get to the clearing now and we'll see what they saw. This is a scale replica going off drawings as those two patrolmen did at the time. Now some people have tried to debunk this story by saying that it was a lighthouse, it was lights from a lighthouse at the time that the servicemen had seen at the East Gate. Personally I don't believe that, because although that lighthouse is no longer in operation, it would have been at the time that the camp was in operation, and the US Air Force would have been used to seeing it bouncing off cloud and that. Plus, how do you explain this, what those two patrolmen saw? I mean, it must have been really terrifying for those men, you know, thinking of approaching it, because it looks like nothing that we produced at the time, or since, aircraft-wise. And here we are, this is it. We'll take a little look around it, and it'll give you some idea of the shape. It's not your traditional saucer, it's not like a perfect disc, which surprised me really, because a lot of UFO sightings up close, that's what they claim they look like. This looks more like a fireman's hat, an American fireman's hat, which maybe that was in the mind's eye when they was describing it. They also saw some strange symbols on the side of it, which they've tried to recreate here. Again, going off what the patrolmen saw. I mean, you do have to remember that these guards that would have been on the camp, although they were trained by the military, they wouldn't have been intelligence type people. I don't mean they would have been low intelligence, I just mean they wouldn't have worked in intelligence, so they would have just been using the basic military training to try and take in all the detail and describe it in as much as possible. You know, so they did pretty well really to take it all in. Bear in mind the surprise, because can you imagine you come across something like this? Even as a soldier, it must have blown their minds at the time.
These are the drawings that they did.
Now, some more evidence that debunks the authored lighthouse theory, which is the lighthouse lights as they thought they'd seen, or some claim as they saw, was afterwards this area. The trees were very tall in this area, but when they came and did a bit of investigating afterwards, they found that the trees were burnt off. The radiation in this area was 10 times the amount it should have been, and there was 3 triangular depressions where they claim the craft had landed. So we're going to make our way now to point 4 on this trail and see what's there. So come on, we'll make our way to point 4. So that's not the end of the story of the Rendlesham Forest sighting. They decided, the US Air Force, to return the following night just in case the craft would return, and this time they come armed with Geiger counters to measure radiation and arc lighting to light it up, and all other kinds of scientific ET type gadgets and gizmos. Unfortunately for them, the craft didn't return to that spot, but they did notice across this field here, roughly at the back of where that house is, not directly at the back of it, it would have been in the distance, what they described as like a pillar of yellow light that was shining down. And then what formed above that was what they described as like an eye shape with a really dark centre. From that, another craft reportedly came from it and headed across the forest, not towards where the original sighting was, but to a point where we're going to go and have a look at, and there was like a red light coming from the top of that and blue lights underneath. So we'll make our way to where the second sighting was. Come on, girls. So this little clearing here is the rough area where the second sighting was seen back in December of 1980. Now, when the patrolmen arrived, the first on the scene, they claimed that they could hear in the distance women screaming. So the question had to be, who were these women that was running around the forest screaming that night, if indeed it was women that was screaming. Also, some animals that was stabled in a paddock close by were going frenzied, as though something had spooked them and disturbed them. So something definitely was going on that night. Again, one of the patrolmen later reported that everything was moving at half speed and in slow motion, and that it was like dreamlike as they approached the scene. Now, interestingly, the second sighting isn't as well documented as the first one that I showed you earlier in this video. So you do have to wonder if this sighting, there's more to it that we don't know about. So folks, we're going to make our way now to where this trail ends, and we'll close this video there. It's not far off now, and then we're back in the car, so off we go. Go on girls, not far to go now. It's about 3 miles this whole trail all in all. It's not a bad walk, but we're all feeling it a little bit, aren't we?
We should have brought some sandwiches.
Well folks, we're at the beginning of the UFO trail. We've done a big loop type of thing. But for us, this is the end of the trail. We're going to get off now and head over to the Bear Grylls truck wagon and get ourselves a burger or something like that. So we hope you've enjoyed this little walk around Rendlesham Forest with us and recalling the UFO incident of 1980, but that burger van's calling, so we're going to get off. So until the next time, from myself, from everyone, it is bye-bye for now.
I made this.